Hi everybody, I am going to talk about social casework recording with reference to the structure, content and the use of records. In social casework practice, recording is defined as a process of writing down relevant information in a systematic manner about the person who has come to the agency seeking some help. The information is about the person, his or her problem, the socio-economic and health factors contributing to the situation of the person, the prognosis, the type of intervention, the progress of the intervention and the procedures for termination or referral. Social casework practice involves many types of recording depending upon factors such as requirements of the agency, the theoretical perspective of the caseworker, the type of intervention and so on. At the end of this talk, we will know the meaning of recording, gain an insight into the purpose of recording, understand the need for recording and its principles, and comprehend the different dimensions of recording. Let me tell you about the need for casework recording and the principles followed. Recording is a written summary of the process of casework. The records of individuals are legally protected except under special circumstances. Records allow caseworkers an opportunity to document their work with individuals and afford legal protection against the suits, as they can show that caseworkers had followed an intervention plan based on an appropriate assessment. Recording is important as it publicizes the efficiency of the services of the agency. Facts have to be gathered, organized and recorded for measurement of results. In the process of giving assistance to an individual, there is also a need to record and document the proceedings for further follow-up and cross-verification. There are compelling reasons to keep good records. Recording is an important and integral part of the casework procedure and is an output of the activity of the casework. The importance of recording lies in both the process as well as the product. As recording and documentation is a part of every profession, casework recording is an inevitable part of the casework process. The demands of recording go along with the pressing demands of accountability and documentation in any profession. There are some guiding principles for maintaining a good record. However, there is no such thing as an ideal or model record. A record is a flexible instrument which should be adapted to the needs of the case situation. Each case is different, the conditions of work have marked differences, and the recording therefore rests not on following an outline but in the mastery of certain component of the process. Accuracy, objectivity, simplicity, clarity and brevity should be observed in writing records. Facts and their interpretation should be distinguished between, as that leads to real objectivity of the subject matter. The outcome should be drawn in a balanced manner without attempting to influence the judgment of the reader. For example, frequent fights between the husband and wife might lead to the caseworker to interpret that the wife dislikes or hates her husband. The record must be orderly in its arrangement. The caseworker should think in advance what should be included and then set the material out in a logical sequence. The casework records are not meant to be literary masterpieces. Therefore, they should be written in simple language and simple style. A verbatim quote can sometimes depict a situation much better than a narrative description. Therefore, wherever possible, the reactions of the individual should be recorded in his or her own words. There should be certain degree of uniformity and standardization as to the form of the observation. A record should have readability and visibility and should contain a clear and concise presentation of the material. For example, content can be organized under topical headings such as interviews, home visits, and contacts. To maintain clarity and accuracy, avoid using words that are ambiguous. Note taking, as far as possible, should be done immediately at the end of the interview and not during the interview. It should always be made clear who are involved in the situation, who is addressing whom, and what the sources of information are. The details of every significant subject or situation should be given. One should not record the self-evident, the insignificant, and the familiar and the repetitive. Any record should show clearly the nature of the problem presented or the request made. Let me describe the key purposes of recording. Recording helps in effective assessment and intervention of the person with the problem. It enables more effective interviewing and intervention in the casework process. It helps to contribute to analytical reflection and improvement in casework practice. It is useful for organizing and structuring of information and for orderly thinking. It refreshes the memory of the worker and increases retrospective understanding. It enables better planning for subsequent interviews. It ensures continuity if any caseworker discontinues the process or comes for the next session after a long time. It helps in measuring or assessing the ability of the agency. It helps for future reference of the person with the problem. It helps in supervision and training of students in casework practice wherever appropriate. It serves as a resource of teaching material and adds to the body of knowledge of social work practice. It enables students to develop analytical and interpretative skills. It is helpful in social research and planning in a particular area. It provides statistical data on social problems. It may perhaps be relevant to court proceedings or complaints at present or in future. Let me outline the advantages of record keeping. The process of writing records enables the caseworker to reflect systematically on what has occurred and plan for future sessions. In other words, the process of making records enhances the quality of the casework process. Records provide the caseworker with the details such as the names of the people mentioned by the individual. This frees a caseworker to concentrate on issues raised by the individual rather than recalling the details from one session to another. Systematic record keeping makes any changes in the individual's material over a series of sessions more apparent. The caseworker can also show the individual the progress of the casework process with evidence. As caseworkers seek to be professional and credible, they need to develop the record keeping practice that supports them in performing their role and meets the public expectations of quality of service and accountability of any professional. This is regarded as an increasingly significant reason which probably explains why most of the case workers around the country have chosen to keep records. Maintaining records in the casework process is the universal norm. Nevertheless, there is a minority of caseworkers who prefer not to keep records at all or only keep records for some individuals, usually when seeing individuals in settings that require records. Let me mention some of those arguments against casework recording. Although casework recording is a key element in the process of casework practice, some caseworkers perceive it as a tedious and time-consuming task that gets in the way of practice rather than enhancing it. They express the view that they spend too much time at their desk in writing the records. Some research into social caseworkers' attitude and experience of recording revealed the fact that the topic of recording has created many strong and ambivalent feelings. One needs to ensure that records are both secure and really confidential. For example, some caseworkers may work in settings where burglaries are so frequent that it is difficult to maintain secure records. Community-based services operating out of converted buses or other forms of mobile premises have to consider the possibility of the theft of the entire casework premises, including the records. Record keeping may complicate trust building with individuals. For example, caseworkers working with the individuals who are vulnerable to legal prosecution, like female sex workers, illicit drug users and others, may have to take into account their clients' fear that the police or other authorities could seize any records. Record keeping is time consuming. Some caseworkers are opposed to the possibility of individuals acquiring a legal right to see records kept about them. Therefore, they prefer not to keep records. Some caseworkers have reservations about creating records which may be demanded by individuals for use outside the casework relationship in legal actions against others. They hope that an absence of records will enable them to concentrate on the therapeutic relationship without having to consider how that work would be viewed in a court of law. Let me outline the aspects of good recording. Good recording is done with the participation of the person whose record it is. The views of the person whose record it is should be recorded, including whether he or she has given permission to share information. The record should be accurate, up to date of the process of casework, which can be reviewed periodically and summarized at the end. It should include the decisions taken during the process and the reasons for these decisions. The chronology of significant events should be included in the record. The facts should be recorded distinctively from the opinions. Whatever is recorded should be evidence-based and ethical. The record should mention the assessment as well as the risk assessment. It should depict a clear and complete picture of care and support given up to date and the ensuing plan of action towards solving the problem of the person. The personal profile of the individual should include details such as name, age, gender, religion, language, region, educational level and disability, if any, of the person. Let me now tell you about records and their preservation. Data protection refers to the set of privacy laws, policies and procedures that aim to minimize intrusion into one's privacy. Once it is decided to keep the records, the existence of the records and the level of security with which they are protected have to be made known to the individual. There is a strong ethical argument that the individuals need to know these facts in order to be in control of the information that they decide to disclose to the caseworker. The minimum standards suggest that the individuals should be informed about the security of the records. There are different kinds of procedures adopted by the caseworkers for security. First of all, physical security of the records is of paramount importance. Locking records in a desk or in a cupboard will prevent casual inspection by anyone. If there is a foreseen risk of some unauthorized person wanting to access the records, then the records have to be kept in a safe under lock and key. Let me discuss about the contents of casework records. There are no fixed rules about what must be included in casework or interview records or how they ought to be written. Casework records that we see vary considerably in style, from brief factual accounts which focus on what the individual reported to ones that include more of the caseworker's thoughts and responses. The guiding principle is that the type of record should be one that supports the therapy and enables it to be delivered with a reasonable standard of care. A good record is written as closely as possible in time to the events it records. Some caseworkers set aside 10 minutes with the individuals for this purpose. If there is any reason to think that a record might need to be produced for legal purposes, it is good to distinguish between what was directly observed, what the individual said, and the caseworker's own response or thoughts. There is no single correct way of writing casework notes. It still appears to be a topic neglected in basic training. Each caseworker has to develop a style that is sufficient to support the casework but without being excessive in what is recorded. Other items to be included in the record are any written and signed consent to all interventions, any written and signed content to all passing of confidential information, all appointments including non-attendance by the individual, intervention contracts, up-to-date record of the caseworker's reasoning behind decisions about significant interventions and general strategies, consultations with anyone else about the individual, copies of any correspondence from the individual or relating to work with the individual, any instructions given to the individual and whether or not the individual acted on these. Let me mention about the matters not to be included in the process of recording. Records ought not to include anything that could disrupt the therapy if seen by an individual. Prejudice and abusive comments ought to be avoided. Negative evaluations should only be included if they serve a therapeutic purpose. For example, a negative counter-transference would be justified if it is integral to the therapy and is a statement about the caseworker's internal processes rather than directly ascribed to the individual. Let me now tell you about the format of casework records and their templates. There are a few components written about how best to structure casework records. There can be two sections. The first section contains useful background information about the individual and the contractual terms that caseworker and the individual have agreed upon. Individuals' records need to be clearly identified so that there can be no confusion regarding identity, because in large agencies, It is not unusual to find two individuals with the same name. A caseworker might include individual's family name, other names, date of birth, address, contact phone numbers. Where handwritten records are kept, it can be an advantage to label each page of the individual record with the individual's full name, so that the possibility of pages being inadvertently placed in the wrong file is minimized. Additional demographic information about the individual, if available, such as marital status, name of the partner or spouse, names and ages of children, referral sources, and so on, could be added. The notes for each casework session may include date of the session, factual information given by the individual, details of the individual's problems, issues, or dilemmas, notes on the process that occurred during the session, the outcome of the casework session, the intervention used by the caseworker, any goals identified, any contract between the individual and the caseworker, matters to be considered in subsequent sessions, the counselor's own feelings about the individual and the casework process, and the caseworker's initials or signature. Let me explain the responsibility of the caseworker related to informing the person or the client about records and recording. The agency needs to establish and maintain good practices for collection of information from individuals availing of the caseworker's service. In this situation, the caseworker needs to be clear about the agency's reason for collecting the information and explain the rationale to the person. He must be ready with no resistance or surprise to answer specific queries from individuals about the details he or she asks for, any forms to be completed, or notes he or she makes. The caseworker should deal with individuals' questions politely, even if they ask in an abrupt or confrontational way. Individuals may feel uneasy about challenging the information systems, and this unease can emerge in an apparently unfriendly way. It is important that the agency commits to the view that individuals have the right to understand why information is requested. The caseworker should explain in a straightforward way how the person can access his or her own information and the extent to which the information is available to others in the agency. Let me explain the responsibility of the caseworker related to informing the person or the client about records and recording. In short, social caseworkers should be open and honest with the person or his or her family wherever appropriate, from the beginning about why, what, how, and with whom their information will or could be shared. They must seek the person's agreement to share their information unless it is unsafe or irrelevant to do so. Let me sum up. In social casework practice, recording is defined as a process of writing down relevant information in a systematic manner about the person who has come to the agency seeking some help. Social casework practice involves many types of recording depending upon factors such as requirements of the agency, the theoretical perspective of the caseworker, the type of intervention, and so on. Recording is an important and integral part of the casework procedure and is an output of the activity of the casework. Although there is no such thing as an ideal or model record, there are some guiding principles for maintaining a good record. As caseworkers seek to be professional and credible, they need to develop the record-keeping practice that supports them in performing their role and meets the public expectations of quality of service and accountability of any professional. Some caseworkers have reservations about creating records which may be demanded by individuals for use outside the casework relationship in legal actions against others. They hope that an absence of records will enable them to concentrate on the therapeutic relationship without having to consider how that work would be viewed in a court of law. Once it is decided to keep the records, the existence of the records and the level of security with which they are protected have to be made known to the individual. Casework records vary considerably in style. Records ought not to include anything that could disrupt the therapy seen by an individual. Prejudice and abusive comments are to be avoided. The agency has to be clear about its reasons for collecting the information and explain the rationale to the client. The caseworker should explain in a straightforward way how the client can access his or her own information and the extent to which the information is available to others in the agency. Let me sign off now and hope to see you in another session. Thank you.